everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If anybody ends up joining in, we'll welcome them. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us. We have a few counselors on today, and it's just really nice to kind of have these opportunities to talk a little bit about Lakehead University. And one of the things that we're trying to do is actually have more regular offerings of these training sessions so that you can drop in at any time, invite any new counselors, or maybe if you just want to catch up on some of the knowledge and you have some time, you can kind of attend these webinars. So thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't met me before, I'm Amanda Mejia, the Manager of Agency Relations and Pathways. So in everyday context, you would be dealing with me when it comes to any contract renewals, any general training to large groups of your counselors, any commission processing that you might need. You've probably been in contact with me. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So this is kind of our virtual agent training series, and it's one of three modules. So the first one that we're going to look at is getting to know Lakehead University. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about that high level information that's going to get you to inform your student about Lakehead and what are the kind of the best offerings for them program wise. You know, there are rankings, stuff about residents. So kind of that high level stuff that you'll need to know in order to kind of advise them through the process. The next module we'll talk about would be our application process. So it will literally talk about how we're going to go through the application so that it's not your first time dealing with the application in front of your student. So we'll talk a little bit about that step by step for both the undergraduate and graduate application. We'll also show you where to submit your agent ID because that is very important to ensure your student is coded to you. And last but not least, we'll talk about the admissions decision. So, once that application has been submitted, where do you go from there? How do you advise your student on the next steps until they receive their offer? So what we'll cover our information about our campuses, our academic programs, both undergraduate and graduate, tuition, so what that looks like both at the undergraduate and graduate level, scholarship offerings, marketing materials, so where you can access this material to continue advising your students, and any important updates. So one of the great things about having these regular offerings is that we're going to be able to provide you up-to-date information on anything going on at Lakehead University or information that's kind of pertinent to you as an agent. So things to remember, if you like what you see, I'll actually be sending a whole bunch of links to you. I'll be sending a whole bunch of links after the session, including kind of everything that we talked about here. I do have a note here asking, can we have a copy of the training PowerPoint? So I will be sending over that information as well. And I also have this located in the same page that you registered for. So when you go to your agent resource page, so I'll show you where that is a little bit towards the end of the presentation. When there's no live offerings, you actually have the opportunity to just have the view the training session, okay? So the question and answer function, I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Zoom. So if you have a question, just put it in our question and answer. I'm going to try and leave some of the questions to the end just so that we can move this along. And if we have any additional questions, we'll go towards the end, okay? And last but not least, we always recommend that if you like what you're seeing, go ahead and follow our Instagram, our social media channels. We have some great events that are coming up so that you can see kind of the student experience. And I'll talk a little bit about those events coming up. So our campuses, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we actually have two main campuses here. So you're looking at Ontario. You can see that Canada is quite large. So we are located in the province of Ontario. The province of Ontario is one of the most popular provinces for students to arrive at, for international students to arrive at. So over 50% of the international student population coming into Canada is actually arriving in Ontario, okay? So you'll see here we have two campuses, so kind of fits two needs. So if you look here, we have our campus that's in Aurelia, so it's about an hour and 20 minutes from Toronto. So Toronto is probably a city most of your students are familiar with, so go ahead and use that kind of as your gauge for them for the Aurelia campus. Thunder Bay is actually in the northwest end of Ontario. So you'll see here, we're located by Lake Superior. So we have about 110,000 people living in Thunder Thunder Bay. And it may seem like a small number for some of your students, but what I always like to remind agents is that Thunder Bay is a very unique city in Ontario because we are the largest city in the northern end of that province. We actually have to manage our city like a larger city. So we have to have all the services and amenities like a larger city so that smaller towns surrounding us are able to kind of use our services, okay? We do have some wonderful natural environments around us. So we'll see some photos in a few moments. But Thunder Bay is such a unique city. I'm actually from Toronto and I moved up to Thunder Bay. And the living expenses are quite low. The job opportunities are great with good salaries. So students actually have a really good quality of life should they consider working during their school time, okay? Aurelia is a city that's, like I said, close to Toronto. It's actually where a lot of Torontonians will go to do their vacations because we have beaches there. So it's close enough to the larger city for them to kind of access that and also give them that quality of life with the natural environment and the water and the beaches that a lot of the students are enjoying. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of those high level things to talk about when you're looking at, selling Lakehead to your students. Number one, I always talk about the population. So we're looking at roughly 8,300 students, a little over that for our campus. So if you see here, here's the Thunder Bay campus. It's quite beautiful. So that natural environment really plays itself out nicely in our own campus. So we have a lake in the middle of campus. Um, most of your students have not experienced snow or skating. So during the winter, this will actually get covered over and freeze over. And some of the times it'll be their first experience skating. Our student success team, what they do is they organize a lot of trips and just different events for students to do. Skating on the lake is one of them. We have a great diverse population. So if we look at the kind of amount of students that we have versus our international student population, so we have over 1,400 international students, and that's continuing to grow thanks to your wonderful support. And we represent over 80 nations. So we're very excited to be expanding kind of our reach and having students come to Canada. You probably heard already that Canada is such a multicultural country that really embraces diversity, and our student population is definitely representative of that. One of my favorite things about Lakehead is kind of your accessibility, not just to faculty, but also to staff. So one of the great things is that we have a small faculty to student ratio. So if you're talking about Thunder Bay, our average is about 15 to 1, and for Aurelia, it's about 13 to 1. And that's incredibly valuable because in a lot of scenarios, students with larger class settings are unable to communicate with their professors. They feel very lost with the content sometimes and maybe not willing to reach out to their professors. So at Lakehead, we kind of make it a mandate to have those smaller class sizes for that exact reason, okay? Um, the other thing is the accessibility to staff. So this kind of is reflective of the community that we have here at Lakehead. So one of my favorite experiences is that on the second day of my job, I actually met the president of the university, and that spoke a lot to me as a staff member because it meant that anybody was accessible. And I hear that over and over again from my students that if they do need help or they need assistance, if the person that's in front of them has not assisted them, they'll find the resources to assist them. So that's something that I'm incredibly passionate about at Lakehead. So we have a number of rankings here at Lakehead University, and I always encourage you to kind of keep looking at your agent page to kind of see the most up-to-date rankings. But Times Higher Education ranked us the highest ranked university under 10,000 students. We are also the number one mainly undergraduate school at the research level. So that means that students who want to kind of undergo research at an earlier time in their studies can do so. So, for example, in Canada, a lot of the times if students want to do research, they actually have to wait till either their fourth year or maybe their master's in some cases. Lakehead University allows students to do it in their first year, second year sometimes, and it really fits really well with that faculty to student ratio. I have one student in our biotechnology program, in our bioinformatics program, who after his first year got a research position with his professor. So that really speaks to kind of that hands-on experience that students are able to get quite early on. We also have a higher average employment rate. So we have a 96.7% employment rate, which is higher than the average in all of Ontario, which is 92% within 2 years of graduation. We'll talk a little bit about why. We have many hands-on experiences kind of implemented into the students' experience during their 4 years. So we'll talk a little bit about why that's kind of higher than average from other institutions. So next we'll talk a little bit about our programming. So I want to start with just kind of our overall academic faculty. So we have we have 10 faculty. So we have faculty of business administration, engineering, science, environmental studies, natural resource management, education, social sciences and humanities, health and behavioral sciences, law, medicine, and graduate studies. And what that means is that when students come to you, we more than likely have a program that's going to be suited for them, okay? So we are a comprehensive university. We have over 52 undergraduate programs. So if you have a student that arrives at your desk, we more than likely have a program that's suitable for them in terms of what they're considering for future education. If your student arrives and they're not quite sure what they want to do, I'll talk a little bit about programs that I definitely recommend. So like I said, we have over 52 programs in a variety of areas. We'll go through the faculties and kind of highlight programs that are most asked about in your regions, okay? So we've kind of taken on the task of determining which programs are kind of more asked about in your particular regions. That way this is more tailored to you. So a Faculty of Business Administration, this is, of course, a program that's significantly asked for from our agents. So there are a few things you want to talk about, and I don't want to kind of overload you with information. So what I'll talk about is very basic information that you want to remember when you're advising your student. So number one, our business administration program is AACSB accredited. And a lot of the times the students will not know what that is or they won't care what that is, but I recommend that you talk to the parents about this, okay? So the AACSB accreditation is something that less than 5% of business schools in the world have. It means that we've been assessed, our curriculum and our faculty have been assessed, and they've been determined that it's top notch, okay? The other thing is our program is managed quite uniquely. So it's a 4-year program. And in their first 2 years, students are going to learn all aspects of business, okay? So they're going to learn economics, they're going to learn finance, they're going to learn a little bit of marketing. So what they'll do is they'll get to touch upon these themes so that they can make their decision in their final 2 years about what program to go into, okay? So we have over 8 majors that students can select from. Some popular ones being marketing, human resources, finance, economics, but we have a number of them. I think this is a good opportunity to introduce your viewbook to you because it's going to be something that's going to be quite handy when you're talking to students. I know you're not going to be able to memorize the 8 majors. So if you look at the back of the viewbook or your brochure, and I'll show you where to access that, you'll see a great table of the programs. So the business program here will show you all of the majors that students can kind of select after, okay? So again, like I said, you don't have to memorize the programs. I definitely recommend you have this accessible. So we use a lot of case-based learning, and what that means is we actually take cases out in the real world in Thunder Bay or Aurelia and ask students to solve those solutions in their projects. Okay, we also have our Ingenuity Makerspace. So that's great because students can access it from their first year and on. And what it is if students have a great idea for a business, they have access to mentors here. They have access to copyright information, lawyers that are going to allow them to kind of copyright or patent anything, kind of resources that they need in order to get their business going. We have that opportunity here. Our Faculty of Engineering, so of course this is one of our most asked about programs, and it is quite unique across Canada. So it is the only program that actually is a four-year program that in your first 2 years you get a diploma, and in your final 2 years you get a degree. So after 4 years, students will actually come out with two accreditations, okay? It is also certified by Engineers Canada, of course. And students can choose from 5 disciplines. So we have chemical, civil, electrical, mechanical, and software. I understand that is a good number of disciplines to look at, so students might be a little bit confused. What I recommend is that students actually look at the course calendar, okay? So what those classes are gonna look like from year 1 to year 4 to truly understand what they're gonna be learning and make that decision. We do have this new offering as well, and this is quite popular in some of our markets. And it's the option to do the Bachelor of Engineering plus the MBA in 5 years. So it's a 4-year engineering degree and a 1-year MBA. Okay, so if you have any questions about that, you feel free to reach out to me. The application will be done through the undergraduate application, and we'll talk a little bit about that next week. The next one we have is Science and Environmental Studies. So as you can imagine, being in Northern Ontario and kind of those northern regions of Southern Ontario, we're very specialized in everything to do with science and environmental studies because we have the perfect environment for them, for students to do that hands-on learning. So we have state-of-the-art laboratories and, like I said, those perfect natural environments. And you'll see in the background as these images play, these students actually being quite involved at an early first or second year within their program. So I'll talk a little bit about the specializations here. We have a number of programs, number one being computer science. So computer science is one of our most asked about program within this faculty. It's a 4-year program, and students can select from business and scientific streams. They learn comprehensive languages such as Java. You can also look at the course calendar for this one if students are debating between software engineering and computer science. They are very different, and students will need to understand kind of what those differences look like and how they want to work for year 1 to year 4. And we do have the ability to specialize within that degree. So the great thing about this program is you can do game programming, you can do health informatics. Health informatics is using technology and health together, so kind of using that data. And it is something that I tell students, agents, that is quite kind of in demand in Canada right now, finding a way to analyze health data, especially in our current climate, but also with all the new technologies coming out. So it is a great program. But we do also have a number of programs. So when you have your, within this faculty, so when you have your view book in front of you, and you're looking at environmental science, environmental studies and sciences, we have all of our pure sciences such as physics. We also have a co-op within physics, which we'll talk about. We have mathematics, so some of your pure sciences, chemistry, biology, anthropology. So that all encompasses here. We also have our Faculty of Natural Resource Management. I love the images that play here, so be sure to kind of keep an eye on these. What students are doing right now are students from forestry who are using drones to kind of map out territory that has not been mapped out yet, okay? As I mentioned, Canada is quite large, so the mapping of some of these regions has not been possible prior to drones. So students will study all aspects of natural resource management within the first 2 years. And then they can specialize in one of six majors, okay? So one of the two programs that kind of branch out from here are environmental studies and forestry. So the program I have highlighted here is forestry. Like I said, this is one of the programs that actually has a 100% employment rate, okay? So it is quite in demand in Canada. So if you have those students that are coming to you and they're saying, I'm not quite sure what I want to do, but they do enjoy biology, for example, suggest forestry. Let them know that, it's 100% in demand in Canada. Both forestry and environmental management both have a 100% employment rate, which is higher than any employment rate that we have on average here. And it's because that, our government is putting a priority in environmental studies and forestry, and they want students and they want people trained in this area. Our faculty of education, so this isn't asked about in most regions, but in some regions, we do get a lot of inquiries about our faculty of education. So this is if your student wants to become a teacher in Canada, okay? So just to be clear, if your student wants to become a teacher in Canada, they'll be doing their education program. So what happens is if your student is coming directly from high school, then the student will actually do a concurrent program, okay? Which means that they're doing their degree at the same time as their education program. So it's a 6-year total degree, okay? So students will apply directly to become or to the education program, but they'll also select another degree, okay? If your student has already finished university and would like to do the education degree, it's called our consecutive education degree, okay? And those terms could be confusing, but just remember that concurrent means it's directly from high school and the student is going directly to education, okay? The other option, consecutive, means that the student has completed their university and they would like to become a teacher in Canada, so that's a 2-year program, okay? During this program, students will do 105 days of placement, okay? So in their final 2 years, they'll get to really get involved in the class setting. We have over 50 partner school boards, some even international. So if your student wants to go abroad to another country and kind of do their placement, they can as well. We have a lot of offerings in the UK, for example, so students can take that opportunity to learn more about other cultures. We also have our Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, and this kind of encompasses all of your arts and humanities that other students are asking for. So for example, your history, your philosophy, your English. I just want to make note, when you see an English program listed on our program, so if you see here, it says English, that's referring to literature, okay? So it won't be kind of linguistics or anything like that. It would be focused on literature. But then we also have our music, our visual arts program. So like I said, we have kind of offerings for any type of student that arrives at your desk. Our visual arts program is one of the ones I love to talk about. It really kind of helps you develop as an artist. We're seeing a lot of students in multiple regions kind of starting to ask for these now that a priority on the arts and humanities is kind of seeing an uprising. So we do have the visual arts program where students do drawing, painting, sculpting, ceramics, and printmaking. And what happens is after the first year, the students will decide which area they want to continue their studies, okay? And in every single year, the students will have the opportunity to do an exhibition of their artwork, and the judge will select one of the students to do a 4-week gallery offering in Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay is quite appreciative of the arts, so there's always kind of a gallery coming in. You can combine majors, so if, for example, your student wants to do history and philosophy, which is quite common, they can go ahead and do that. The next program I just kind of want to highlight within this faculty is the media, film, and communications. So we're seeing a lot of students asking for this in recent years. This deals with all types of communication. So students will deal with film, they'll deal with production and directing of films. In your first year, you'll actually do a mini clip. So we have one student, an excellent student, one of our international students who did this great film in their first year, but it also deals with photography and communications as well. So kind of delivering your message in a variety of mediums. So we have world-renowned instructors as well, cutting-edge technologies for students to kind of use at their own pace, and internship opportunities during even starting in their first year. So last but not least, we have our Faculty of Health and Behavioral Sciences. So we'll talk a little bit about these because the one I want to highlight is our nursing program. So I'm very thankful that Lakehead is one of the few universities to actually offer acceptances into our nursing program for international students. Students, this program is quite unique across Canada. It actually has them doing a placement starting in their first year. So they'll do a placement every single year. In some institutions, they actually have to wait till their third and fourth year. But we think it's important for them to have that hands-on from the moment they arrive. So they'll do their placement in a variety of settings as well. So they'll, understand what it's like to work in a rural community. They'll understand what it's like to work within a hospital. And they'll get to determine, they'll gain different skills in each, but they'll also get to determine kind of which area they see themselves kind of finally finding a position. We do also have our kinesiology program here. I saw our psychology program, our gerontology program. So a variety of programs that students can consider for pre-med. I'll talk a little bit about medicine in a second because it is quite a common question. So again, we have state-of-the-art labs that students can then, as you can see here, get that a simulator going so that they can understand what it's like to actually work with a patient. So we also have our Faculty of Law and Medicine. I highlight these separately because I just want to take a moment to explain kind of how they work in Canada. So if you have a student who's asking you, they say, I want to become a lawyer in Canada, or I want to become a doctor in Canada, these programs are called non-direct entry programs. And what that means is a student cannot go directly from high school into this program, okay? So what students could do is they have to complete a undergraduate first, okay? We typically recommend an undergraduate program. So for example, applied life sciences or biology or even the kinesiology or nursing to kind of familiarize them with, basic scientific terms and theories. And then what they do is they apply to the Faculty of Medicine. So they apply to med school, okay? Med school is additional education, okay? Same thing happens with the Faculty of Law. So students will first complete their undergraduate degree. It could be in anything in this area. Most students, we see them from backgrounds of political science or philosophy, just kind of having touched upon these themes, but it's not necessary. And then they can apply to the Faculty of Medicine, okay? The one thing to note about this, it's very important to communicate to your students, is that you can only receive acceptance to Lakehead University's Faculty of Law or Faculty of Medicine if you already have your PR status, okay? So that's one extra step for the students to take. So graduate programs, we don't spend too much time talking about graduate programs. If you want to have more in-depth knowledge about certain programs, feel free to book an appointment with me individually. But that's because our partnership, what we'd like to see is an increase in our undergraduate numbers, okay? We are one of the few institutions to accept agent applications to our graduate programs, and we do also pay commission on those. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of the main ones. So most of the programs you see here are actually 2-year programs. So off the bat, when you're talking to a student, you'll know our master's programs are 2 years programs. Okay, the ones that are kind of asked about the most would be our engineering. So if you look here, we have our engineering program, both in civil, chemical, electrical, and computer, and environmental and mechanical at the master's level. Okay. We do also have our MBA, so our business administration and business management program, which is 1 year, okay, or 1.5, depending on which one the student selects. And we also have our public health and psychology programs that are asked about a lot, quite frequently as well. So when you're looking at your view book here, our graduate programs are actually on this end. The great thing about this table is it is a great legend for you. So not only does it tell you the program, it also tells you which campus it's located in. So the graduate programs, just for your reference, is always located at the Thunder Bay campus, okay? If you look at your table with the graduate programs, it'll also show you whether or not a program has the ability for it to be course-based or thesis-based, okay? So when you see that, course-based or thesis-based, it means the student has the option of selecting course-based or thesis-based. A course-based means that a student has a set number of courses that they need to take within those 2 years. Once they complete those courses, they have their master's. A thesis is more traditional, where you're going to be doing your thesis, you're going to be doing your thesis project, and you're going to be presenting your work, okay? So it's just, that's the difference there, okay? So we also have co-op programs within our graduate studies, and I'll talk a little bit in a moment on the next slide about what a co-op is. And then when you're looking at this table here, there's a little diamond on each program that has a co-op, okay? So that you're not letting your student know that all programs have a co-op, you're letting them know which ones, okay? So you can have this as a clear legend of when to let the student know that there is a co-op offered. So like I said, I already talked a little bit about course-based masters, thesis-based masters. If you have any additional questions, again, feel free to book an appointment or reach out to me. And then we have these collaborative opportunities. And what that means is it's very similar to what I mentioned previously when we kind of ask the community, what solutions do you need? So for example, in the MBA, students are required to work on a project. In past recent years, it was with Bombardier, which is located, the head office is located in Thunder Bay. And you know, this Bombardier said, this is our issue. And the MBA students were kind of put into different groups to kind of solve that, present a solution for Bombardier to proceed with. So the cooperative advantage, I'll talk a little bit about that. You might hear this a lot in Canadian institutions. So co-op, cooperative education, and basically what that means is it's very similar to an internship or a placement. So if you're talking to your student and they're unfamiliar with that term, let them know that that's what that is. However, all of our co-ops are actually paid, okay? So it depends on the student. So the student can go to 4 to 16-month work terms. It depends if they want to do a shorter term or a longer term. It's always paid for, like I said. So what we've seen is an average of $20 to $25 per hour Canadian for the student. It's not mandatory, so students aren't required to do the co-op if the co-op is an option for their program. So let them know that, you know, it's not a requirement. Should they want to decide after the first year, they could do that as well. Okay. We also have over 140 national and international partners. So I'll show you a little bit of who we have. So IBM, HSBC, Honda, Bombardier. So some of those big names that you probably are familiar with. But the other thing about this is that this is what translates to our higher average employment rate. So students who do take co-op, we're seeing that a lot of the times, you know, they're more job ready, but they've also stayed in communication with their actual co-op organization or business and received an offer afterwards as well, okay? So we do recommend it. We have one student from the computer science program who actually decided to do it in New York a few years ago and found a lot of success there with that company. So I just want to talk briefly about our English academic program. So if you do have students who do not have their English proficiency yet, we also have our our academic English program. Next week, I'll talk a little bit more about applications and when you can apply, and kind of what documents you're required um, to put on the application. But for now, we have the student who does not have that English proficiency can apply to Lakehead at the graduate and undergraduate level without that English proficiency, and they would be, if given an offer, if admissible, the student will be given an offer with the opportunity to do their English academic program. And once that's complete, they can go into their academic program, okay? But if you have students who are just looking to do their English academic program and that's it, we do have that opportunity for them. It's certified by Languages Canada. Its focus is not only on strengthening English skills, but also within the class setting. So, how to write essays, how to write comparative essays. And I've heard from a lot of students that they like that aspect of the program. And we do also do Canadian culture excursions and experiences. So it's one of my favorite things about our team. So we do have an huge team at the International Center who kind of all of their energy goes into making these experiences for students and kind of making sure they have a good time while they're here in Canada. So if you have any questions about kind of this program in particular, if you want to send a group of students, or if you have questions about kind of how it works with the offer, and versus the English program, again, feel free to book an appointment with me. This program is offered every 4 months, so it's manages the same as a semester, okay? So you can apply for entry into September, you can apply for entry into January, and you can apply for entry into May, and we do also have an intensive program that happens between July and August, okay? So when to apply, these are recommended deadlines. So again, we're thinking a lot for the next cycle here. Okay, so now that we recognize that it's summer right now, and some of your students some of you have some more time to be looking at this. I just want to make sure that you are looking at the cycle throughout. Okay, so for fall, for the undergraduate, we definitely recommend to apply before March 1st. Our our applications usually take about 10 days to process at the undergraduate level. So right now there are some programs that are currently accepting applications still. So if you did want to apply, at the end of this kind of training session, I'll show you kind of where you can access all of this information, okay? But if you're thinking about winter entry for your students at the undergraduate level, that would be before November 1st. And at the spring session, we do not allow students to come in the spring session for only undergraduate, okay? And some exceptions are made, but we definitely recommend fall entry, and if they can't, January entry, okay? At the undergraduate level, the recommended deadline is February 1st. The difference here being for the psychology program. So if you have a student interested in the psychology program, it would be December 15th, okay? So we do need an earlier application for that. And for winter, it would be September 30th and January 15th for graduate, okay? Some programs do have January and spring intakes at the graduate level. I'll also show you again where to get all of those start terms to make sure that you're advising the student accordingly. So admission requirements, again, we're going to dive deep into these next week, okay? We'll talk a little bit about kind of those minimum requirements, additional requirements, and how to meet those. But basically, we're looking at a minimum 70% average at the high school level. So if they've completed their secondary school program, we'll need to see a minimum 70% final average in the final year, okay? And then for the graduate program, it's completion of their degree at a recognized university and a 3.0 on a 4-point scale overall academic average in the years that they've done their program, okay? Again, meeting the minimum requirement does not mean you're going to be given an offer. So we'll talk a little bit again about that next week in 2 weeks in our the next step application, the admissions decision. So we'll dive deep into this next week as well. So for the English proficiency, if your student is proficient in English, then they'll do an IELTS of 6.5 with no score less than 6, a TOEFL with 80 with no less than 19. We are also temporarily allowing the Duolingo English test. It's a great test that can be done at a low cost, but with also right from their home. So it does have a lot of security measures that allows them to take the test straight from home. And we're looking for 110 in all of our programs. The exception being nursing and education, which is 120. Again, nursing and education, they have a higher TOEFL and IELTS as well, and you can kind of visit that on our website. And that's because you're going to be dealing with the community in your first year, right? So because you're dealing with the community in your first year, it requires a heavy English proficiency. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about residence now. Okay, so living on campus. I'm sure you're all familiar with the benefits of living on campus, so I won't talk a little bit about that. I'll just give you kind of what the layout is and kind of the pricing so that you can advise your students. So if you look here, this is our Thunder Bay campus, and our residence is right here. So if you can see how close it is, it's about a 3-minute walk from any one of your classes. Okay, so that's kind of what we've seen students be very excited about. It's so close to campus that students can, wake up, get ready, and go straight there. So if you look here, this is our dorm style room, okay? So students have all of these amenities, and if you look here, it is quite a large space. What's unique to Lakehead is that we always give you your own room, okay? So they're not paying extra fees or anything. We like to keep it so that it's one student per room. So if you see here, the student will get a bed, they'll get a great desk space. Students will have a window, so it's beautiful lighting, natural lighting that comes in for studying for exams and stuff. They also get a fridge. So from my knowledge, most institutions do not provide this. So that makes me very happy because I remember, being a student and just really wanting a nice fresh Coke. And walking to, having to go to the lounge room. So it's great that they now offer the fridge itself. So this is a price. This dorm room is priced with a mandatory meal plan. So it's 7 days a week and all you can eat. So students can come at various times throughout the day. If they want to come twice for breakfast, for example, if they want to come twice for lunch, they can do so. And we see that happening a lot, especially because students will come later with their friends. So you're looking at about 11 to 12,000 Canadian. The difference there being the type of the rooms the student selects. So there is a room that has a little bit more space. So that's kind of what accounts for that higher end, okay? But the lower end is also still offers all of the same amenities. It's just a smaller surface area. So next I'll talk about our most popular option. So this is something that students love because it's actually a house on campus. So it's a townhouse, it's 4 private bedrooms. The student will have one room and kind of share the rest of the space. And it's quite inexpensive. So it's about $7,873 Canadian. And that's for, just so that you're aware, these prices are for an 8-year academic term. Okay, so students arrive in September and they'll or end of August, and they'll continue up until April. So that's kind of that 8-month interval. So if you see this great imagery of the space itself. We also have our apartment, so very similar in terms of kind of the amenities, just the layout's a little different, okay? So they have their own room, it's a private bedroom, and they share the rest of the living space. The difference here being it's not a 2-story, it's a 1-story, so you have one suite, okay? You have Wi-Fi and phone, just like the other one, and it's about 7,462 Canadian, okay? So again, quite inexpensive. If you look here, this is our Aurelia campus. So our residents are to the right, and again, maybe a 1-minute walk to any one of their classes. So if you look here, this is the only option. So students have their dorm room option. They have their own room. The difference being here that they're actually sharing a washroom with an individual beside them. Okay, so they do have kind of somebody that they're going to share with and be kind of in contact with. This is going to be with a mandatory meal plan as well, and it's 12 to 13,000 Canadian. Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about tuition and scholarship next. I want to move along just so that we are kind of staying within our time. So tuition here, you can see for undergraduate, it's 2 academic terms, which means you're making the payment in 2 separate installments, okay? So just when you're talking with your students, let them know that. So tuition is starting at 25,000 to 32,000 Canadian, okay, for the year. And we do have extensive scholarships for students at the undergraduate level, which I'll talk about in a moment. You also want to consider your ancillary fees, which means facilities. If they're using any of their facilities, then this would be an add-on, okay? Students can select which additional fees they want to pay. So this is just if they were to select all of them. And the one thing to always talk to your students about is UHIP, which is our health insurance plan in Ontario that all institutions must kind of ensure that their students have. So please don't recommend that they do a privatized one because Ontario requires us to have coverage similar to an Ontario resident, okay? So what happens is that students pay the $636 Canadian amount, and they'll get a card that allows them to access the doctor, go to the hospital, and not pay additional fees. Okay. The only thing that isn't covered here would be things that aren't covered for a Canadian, for example, for an Ontario citizen, sorry, which would be dental and vision, but that is covered by their student fees and by their student insurance. Okay. For graduate, we're looking at 23,000 to 46,000. Again, this is 3 academic terms, so the students are going to make 3 separate installments. So for the undergraduate, you can see that there are 2 separate payments, and for the graduate, it's 3 separate payments. The one thing I did want to mention here is that we have a tuition fee calculator, and I'm going to show you where to access that as well on your agent page, because that tuition calculator will allow you to select any program that the student is considering and let them know immediately kind of what that price would look like. So scholarships. Our undergraduate scholarships. So we are, thankfully Lakehead is one of the #1 institutions to provide scholarships to students at the undergraduate level. So we're looking at an average starting at 75, and it's going to be in their final year of high school. Okay, so 75 to 79% is going to get them 4,000 for their first year. 80 to 89 is going to get them 5,000 per year. And 90 and above is going to get them 7,500 per year. And we've actually awarded a significant amount of the top one because thankfully you guys are bringing us some top tier students. So please advise your students to kind of have this in mind if they have this average. What happens is that students don't actually have to apply to this because they're applying to an undergraduate program, they will automatically be considered for this. So on your end, you won't need to worry about additional applications. Graduate funding. So graduate funding is quite limited. We do recommend in a lot of cases graduate students be self-funded, but we do have some scholarship bursaries and awards, assistantships, and also faculty research scholarships. So we have the link here for graduate funding, and students can always access that to see what's upcoming in the year in terms of funding, okay? All of these links I'm going to be providing for you after the webinar, so don't worry. So we talked a little bit about the brochure. We're kind of closing up now so that we can leave some time for questions. But we talked a little bit about the view book. So that's this great thing that you've been seeing here. We do a refresh every year. So the new one is coming out for 2021 in August. And so you'll have access to this view book and brochure on our publications page, okay? So you can download it and always have it accessible to you. And the view book, just so you understand the differences, the view book is kind of this extensive book that talks a lot about program specifics, kind of career outcomes, and shows them what life at Lakehead is like. Brochures are when it has condensed information about tuition fees, about scholarships, and it's just kind of that high level information that you need to know when you're in front of a student. So I typically recommend have the brochure in front of you when you're talking to a student initially, and bring in the view book when you're talking to a student who's a little bit more interested and advanced in the process. So a few updates that I just kind of want to make you mindful of. Like I said, this is a great opportunity for us to have this dialogue. So we do have a website specific to COVID and important updates for current and future students. So if you have students who are currently here, I know you guys have been great in kind of supporting students throughout their cycle. So if they have any questions, there's this coronavirus page that students can access with weekly updates. We have announced now that online delivery is happening in the fall, okay, for most programs. And we have that when students are going through their course registration, which I'll talk about in a moment. So when students are talking of doing their course registration, they can actually see which programs are going to be in Zoom and which programs are going to be in person. Typically, in-person classes are only 4-year classes. Okay, so when they're doing that course registration, you can check that there. FastPass is something that can help your students with their kind of registering for classes if they have any questions. So I'll send you the link on where to register for FastClass, which are these sessions that'll help guide them through the registration. Okay. So this is one thing I wanted to talk about, the resources for agents. So we do have a new page specifically tailored to you where you can download all of these publications, so the view book and the brochure in 10 different languages. So depending on where you're coming from and the types of parents you're dealing with, we have kind of the opportunity for you to download multiple languages, because we do understand that parents and grandparents and just other extended family are sometimes part of this decision. We have all the information about latest updates on commission deadlines, so if you have any questions about that. We have the latest updates on programs still accepting applications. We have access to all of these training modules, and we have the opportunity for you to book with your market representative. So your market representative, each of you kind of are assigned a market representative. You've probably already been in contact with them, but you can book an appointment with them or you can book an appointment with me. Okay, so I'll be sending all of this information to you after the webinar. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was additional live events. So we have our Monday meetup happening, our Transition Tuesday, and all of this is dedicated to kind of supporting the student before they arrive. So now, they're about to arrive, they can meet their advisors, they can ask visa questions. So on Tuesdays when we have our immigration advisor kind of jumping on, you can feel free to register for these and ask your questions as well, okay? So what's next? Next week, we're going to be doing the application process, like I said, and Module 3, the admissions decision. So I'm just going to take the floor for questions. We do have a few that came in. So I have a question here, a statement here saying, please provide your contact details or how to book an appointment. Also, please let me know the deadlines again. So like I said, I'm going to be sending over the kind of everything that we talked about here in terms of the links, but I'm going to send my email here so that you guys can all have access to it. I have another question here. It says, can students do academic English and then pass to an undergraduate course on the same study permit? So Shannon, this is something that we've seen in the past. So the best thing to do is typically our immigration advisor will assist the student in that application. Typically, it has to happen separately because they don't get the full one, but it is dependent on the market. So if you'd like, you can send me an email and I can ask the immigration advisor in particular to your specific market, okay? And so I have another question. It says, this fall, do students have the opportunity to study the semester online and arrive in person in January? So what we've done is we've tailored it so that the program is done online and they can continue their studies in person later on. It is still unknown whether or not what that January intake looks like, because we are currently awaiting updates from the Canadian government in order to make those decisions, okay? So it is tailored, like I said, for the program, for students to begin their online program program and then arrive in person on campus, okay? Just so that everyone is aware and in kind of in the loop with what the Canadian government has said. The Canadian government has allowed students who are studying online first and then coming to complete up to 50% of their studies online, okay? And then still be eligible for their postgraduate work permit, okay? And the last thing I just want to bring your attention to is our virtual tour. So students, since they're at the comfort of their own homes right now, they can actually walk through campus, both the Aurelia and Thunder Bay campus. They can walk through campus, they start on the lake, and they can just kind of explore the scenery and also the halls of campus to see what it would look like as a student, okay? Any other questions? Okay, so right after this, I'm actually going to be sending you guys all of these links. Like I said, you'll then have my contact information and we'll be in constant communication. If you have any questions that I can answer, I'll go ahead and do that. If not, I'll just ensure that we're connecting you with your market representative if you aren't familiar with them yet, okay? All right, everyone, thank you so much. Have a great day. And thank you so much for your support during this time. It is a crucial time and you are our partners and we're very grateful for the support you're providing your students.